So you have your frontal bone. Then, then zygomatic bone. Then nasal bone. Then lacrimal bone. Then your maxillary bone. Siya, is aware lang mo those mga bones. Okay, parts. Other parts. Okay, you have this your orbit. And you have the orbital margin there. Okay, above the orbit, you have a protrusion there above. We call that protrusion now as your supraciliary arches.
Supraciliary arches.
Okay, supraciliary arches. Then, above the orbital margin, there's a presence of a notch there, or half circle. We call that now as the supraorbital notch. Supraorbital notch. If ever, ringin yun na siya full circle, so you have supraorbital foramen. There are some skulls there nga ringin ako, like this one. Ringin mo na siya. So, you have supraorbital foramen. Okay. So next, here. You have the opening there. So we call this opening now as your anterior nasal aperture. Naman sa anterior side, so anterior nasal aperture. Okay, below the opening or the aperture, there is a protrusion, sharp protrusion below the midline. So we call that now as your anterior nasal spine. Anterior nasal spine. And then inside the aperture, you have this structure, a vertical structure there at the middle. Call that now as your boomer. So boomer. Then at the side, na siya yung hook-like structure at this side. So on the most inferior, you have your inferior concha or concave. Inferior concave or siya, kung duha concave, kung usara concha. So then above that, you have the middle nasal concha. So duha concave. Those who have a skull there, makita mo sa sud at the side nga na yung magkuha na structure. Okay. Next, at the midline of your maxillary bone, you have again suture. We call the suture na sure intermaxillary suture. Intermaxillary suture. Then in this part here, okay, we call this now as the alveolar process of the maxillary bone. The alveolar process of the maxillary bone. Okay, then there is again a foramen below the orbital margin, so we call that opening now as the infraorbital foramen. The infraorbital foramen. Okay, then at the side or the lateral side of the face, if there's a foramen there, we call this your zygomaticofacial. Kung napag is more sa zygomatic bone like this one, we call this now as your zygomaticotemporal foramen. Kung naaring more sa anterior, you have zygomaticofacial. On the side, you have zygomaticotemporal foramen. Yeah. Okay. So, okay, at the orbit, if you're going to look inside the orbit, you have two slit-like structure. Two slit-like structure or slit-like opening. Not slit-like structure, but slit-like opening. Not slit-like opening. Kani. Kana o kani. Oo, kita. Oo, kita.
Tara o?
Sa orbit ninyo.
Kanirong nakita. Tara o? Ay, kani siya. Kani o kani, sir.
Slit-like opening ba? Slit and light opening. So
Asa?
above, that will be your superior orbital fissure. And below, you have your inferior orbital fissure. Yeah. Okay. Then, medial to your superior orbital feature. Nanti buhok. Kaya pwede white. Pwede ito. Hindi ako makita. Never so far. Because of your video. Kaya buhok there or opening. So that will be your optic foramen or optic canal. Yeah. Oh.
Media sa unsa man na.
Medial sa superior orbital fissure. Ayan, kita. Oh, kalau naman na skull. Okay. Okay, then here at your lacrimal bone, you still have an opening. Ayan siya. So lacrimal foramen, still have an opening there. So call it your lacrimal foramen. Yeah. Okay, here. Any questions so far? Then, okay. Let's move on to this skull kay mas klaro siya. So you probably have this suture. May suture dira, may suture here. Suture. Okay. So as we mentioned, if ever you have the suture, near to the suture, we call that bony part na as the process. And we name the process based on which bone yung i-connect. So like this one, so there's a suture there between your maxillary bone and your frontal bone. So we call this part now as the maxillary process of the frontal bone. And the other portion there is the maxillary bone. So this would now be the maxillary process of the frontal bone. Then this one will be frontal process of the maxillary bone. Here. And here you still have a suture yapon. So we call this part now as the between zygomatic and maxillary man. So this would be the zygomatic process of the maxillary bone. This one would be the maxillary process of the zygomatic bone. Okay na, here. And this one you still have a suture. So we call this part now between zygomatic and frontal. So this would be your zygomatic process of the frontal bone. Then this will be frontal process of the zygomatic bone. Okay, here. Now, any questions? Then